Hello and welcome to Absolute Trust Talk. I am the host today, Kirsten Howe, and we're having a rainy day here in Northern California, so we're very excited about that. I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a lot happening here in my house. My bathroom is being ripped apart, so you might hear some of that. As a result, I have my two foster kittens right on the desk next to me because that's freaking them out, but we'll get through this. I just want you to know there's a lot going on. Anyway, I'm glad you're here today because we are going to be talking about something that I don't think people really talk about enough, the impact of a serious illness or injury on the whole family. When somebody has a serious illness or an injury, of course, we expect hospital visits, doctor's appointments, medication. But what we don't really talk about, because I think most people just really aren't aware, is all the rest of it. What's happening every day? What's happening in the middle of the night? All the caregiving and actually medical care that the family is expected to provide. My guest today, Roberta Carson, is going to talk about her personal experience, which led her to becoming really an amazing resource for other families. As I said, my guest, Roberta Carson, started Zago, which is a nonprofit organization to help patients and family caregivers better manage illnesses and injuries after her experience caring for her teenage son, Zachary, during his 27-month battle with terminal brain cancer. Roberta very astutely realized that patients and families urgently need practical, easy to use information and tools. And so as a result, she founded Zago and developed her unique award-winning Zago Care system. I love that word, system, to help patients and family caregivers manage really any kind of medical condition, including dementia, which is near and dear to my heart. Many of our clients are dealing with that in their families. Zago is a charitable organization, and 100% of the profits from the sale of her Zago Care system, which we will talk about a little bit later, are donated to innovative brain tumor research in memory of Zachary. So, Roberta, thank you so much for being here and welcome. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm thrilled to be here.
As I said, all of this really flows out of your experience with your son, Zach. So maybe we should start with you giving a little of that background. Talk to us about your journey with him.
Well, Zachary was a healthy 17-year-old boy who had no history of physical problems, who developed a few little headaches here and there, but didn't seem so sick. And then he rapidly degraded and was just having a lot of head symptoms, headaches, and some other things. And we took him to the pediatrician, who decided to do an MRI. And before we got home as we were walking in the door, the phone was ringing. Please come in. And we found out that afternoon that he had a brain tumor. The next day, we were meeting with specialists. We found out that he had what's called the DIPG, which is the deadliest of all pediatric cancers, and started treatment the next day.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's intense. and you were given a prognosis at that point, or pretty early on there?
Yeah, so we found out on Wednesday that he actually had a brain tumor, but our pediatrician, like any other pediatrician, doesn't know that much about brain tumors and
Sure.
can't make decisions about treatments and whatnot. So the next day we saw a pediatric neuro-oncologist who told us about the diagnosis and told us that if Zachary did not receive treatment, he would only live for another 4 to 6 weeks. And that overall, the survival rate for children with this tumor is somewhere between 2 and 5%. So it was grim, to say the least.
Okay. And as I said in my introduction, you had 27 months with him. So there was treatment. You elected to go down the treatment path rather than just not pursue that. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. That experience. You made a transition there from being a mom of a teenage son to now being a caregiver.
Right. Overnight, immediately. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
shocking to, have this child who was healthy a week or two before and now is dying. And, we're thrust into this world. They're using terms that we cannot understand. Even the name of the tumor, I had to write it down. And for the first few days, when people are asking me, I had to read the piece of paper. I couldn't remember how to pronounce it or what the words were. And we were told there was no known treatment, but he could try a clinical trial. And the doctor describes the 3 medications that are on trial, the pros and cons, and asks us which one to choose.
Oh, wow.
Which we didn't even understand what he was talking about. How could we possibly decide?
Yeah. How can you make a choice like that? Yeah.
Yeah. So
But you did. Yeah.
Well, we said to him, what would you do if it was your
It
kid?
was your son.
And he said, I'd pick option A. And we said, that sounds good to us. And so off we went.
Okay. And so then the rest of the story is long and not. Let's talk about some of the things that you had to deal with.
Well, like many people who are dealing with cancer, at first you have a lot to get used to, but then it becomes sort of your new normal. Zachary had 30 days of radiation and started chemo, and he was started out with a chemo pill, not an infusion, so he took it every day. And he had MRIs every 6 weeks and doctor's appointments even more regularly than that. And, it just threw us into a tailspin because not only were we so sad and emotional that our child had a terminal illness, but also just overwhelmed by what that meant for us in terms of making hard decisions and trying to learn all these different things about what it meant for him and what medications and when to take them, and started seeing all these specialists. Like many people with cancer, you start out with the cancer, but then the drugs are so toxic that you end up with all these secondary health problems.
Okay. And then you're pursuing treatments or remedies to address that in addition to the cancer. And so it just kind of becomes a matrix of things that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah, and specialists to see, and then you're taking a medication for one side effect, and then of course that medication gives you another side effect. And Zachary started on a chemo pill, and by the time he died, he was on like 22 medications, and all the other ones were treating side effects. Oh my! Only one was for the cancer itself.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so now you one of the things that you said when you and I were talking off mic earlier was that you started out, going to these doctor's appointments with Zach. Of course, he was a minor at the time. He was only 17, so you had to be there. And you would sort of write little notes on slips of paper that you found in your purse, probably.
Yeah.
and at some point, I think pretty early on, you realized, I got to get more organized than this.
Actually, I wish I could say that I realized it. I had, you're so overwhelmed when this happens to you. You literally can't function. You can't do anything. Your mind just stops working. So I had all these scraps of paper that we were using to take notes at appointments. And my sister said to me, why don't you have a notebook? And I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of that. I'm like, I don't know why I don't have a notebook. I need a notebook, obviously. So I scrounged around, I found a notebook, I taped in all my little scraps of paper, and that became my go-to source of records. I used it to take notes at doctor's appointments, obviously, but also to keep track of things at home.
Right. Yeah. It's not just, I need to write down what the doctor is saying to us. Well, first of all, talk about that, and I personally can relate to that. And I'm sure everybody listening, you walk out of the doctor's office and well, I wish I would have asked this question, or did he say this, or did he say this? And there might be a subtle difference, but it matters. So
Oh,
yeah,
it really matters.
Just writing down every word out of the doctor's mouth, I think, is probably valuable lesson. That's what you got to do, right?
You have to write down as much as you can. And I would also recommend recording an appointment. And state laws vary. So I think it's always a good idea to ask the doctor, or just let them know, are you okay if I record this appointment? And many doctors encourage it because they want their patients to get the best care possible. And if you're not understanding or remembering what you've heard, it's hard to follow up correctly.
Right. Yeah. So good record keeping, good note taking when you're listening to the doctor. And then also just sort of between doctor's appointments, keeping records about what's happening, what you are doing, what you are observing. I'm guessing that's a big part of it also.
Yeah, we had to write down, any side effects he had, when he had a headache, if he was vomiting, any kind of symptoms. You had to keep track, because when you go to the doctor and they say, oh, how's it been this week? You don't want to say, well, I think he had a headache, but I can't even remember what day or when it happened. Was it right after the pill? Was, the chemo pill? Was it first thing in the morning? Like, these are important facts to have knowledge of when you go into a doctor's and not be guessing, so we just kept everything in our notebook, just took notes at home, at the doctor's, everywhere we went, writing stuff down.
Well, and especially, as you said, each new medication caused its own side effects, but you got to have those records to establish that correlation, right? Did it cause a side effect? Well, it happened an hour later. I think that's probably the case. But without the record, you can't even share that with the doctor. Right.
And importantly, people assume that doctors on your medical team, because, you often have specialists when you're dealing with a serious illness. People assume that every doctor has a record of what medications you're taking and when you take them and your testing results, and they don't. And that's where keeping notes and keeping records is so important, because when you go to a specialist, you have to be able to tell them why you're there. And we learned that the hard way. So the first specialist we saw was a cardiologist, and he said, why are you here? And I was like, you don't know? Like, nobody told you? And he's, no, so luckily I had all my notes. I'm like, well, let me flip back and look through these records. Oh yeah, he had this test. The doctor's worried about that, so he thought we should come and see. So it's so important to be, engaged in the process and take good notes and keep all the documents organized, because you're the one who is in charge of this process. Nobody is overseeing this for you. You have to do it yourself, or for a loved one.
Yeah. And you were called upon to do things that, really border on at least practicing nursing care, as opposed to maybe not being a medical, not being a physician, not practicing medicine without a license, but you were doing what an RN would have done at home, is what I've heard from you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, towards the end of Zach's life, when he was very sick and was in and out of the hospital, the amount of things we had to do to keep him alive were mind-boggling. So he was paralyzed, which, by the way, happened from a impact of the medication he was taking. And he couldn't talk, he couldn't walk, he couldn't swallow, he couldn't move anything. So we had to feed him through a nasal feeding tube, which is hard to monitor, to give him just the right amount and not so fast that he's choking on it or feeling sick from it. He had 2 injections that we had to give him. So we had to learn how to give him shots, and we practiced 2 times, and then they sent us on our merry way. But interestingly, one of the shots had to be in 4 quadrants of his stomach, rotating around. And the other shot had to be leg, stomach. And we had to make sure that we weren't putting shots 2 times in a row in the same quadrant of his stomach. So my husband and I are engineers, and we had a huge chart. So we were keeping track of where we gave each injection, so we were following the requirements. We had a piece of equipment to pull fluid out of his lungs. We had another piece of equipment to get saliva from the back of his mouth. We had to monitor his oxygen. We had to take care of pressure wounds because he was paralyzed and unable to move. We had to keep moving him on a schedule to prevent blood clots, which sadly is how he ended up dying. He got a deep vein thrombosis, which traveled to his lungs, and he had a pulmonary embolism and ended up dying of respiratory failure. But the amount of things that we were doing, never mind also keeping track of 20 plus
Medications, right.
And as we were leaving the hospital, not one person said to us, how are you doing this? Are you sure you can do this? How are you keeping track? How are you making sure the medications are given at the right time and in the right way? How are you making sure you're not giving those injections at the same spot twice in a row? Nobody said anything. They just packed us up and sent us home.
So they just kept layering more and more onto you because, you know, he was at home. He wasn't in the hospital where a nurse would be doing those things for him. And nobody thought to say, are you sure you can do this? Right. How are you doing it? So really, I mean, the fact that you're both engineers, I'm sure really helped a lot because you guys know how to run a system. And I have clients who are engineers. I get that. So you had massive organizational chart that just, this is what we have to do next, probably like minute by minute. We can't drop the ball anywhere here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. I mean, at the end, I'd say for the last 4 to 6 weeks of Zach's life, he needed active care 24 hours a day. And I mean, not just sitting next to him, doing something for him or to him or with him.
Yeah.
Because he was completely incapable and also in severe pain 24/7.
And that's true for lots of people with serious illnesses. There are periods where, you know, it's really intense and there's a lot to do and a lot of it falls on the family. Now you, Roberta, you talked about they just kept adding medications and to counteract this and that. And I know that you have, one of the resources that you have is sort of a guide that helps people when a new medication is being prescribed. One of the things that you have written about is kind of like, what are the questions you should ask when the doctor says, okay, we're going to try this new medication?
Right. So in the guidebook, which is part of the ZagroCare system, which we'll probably talk about in a few minutes, we have an extensive section on medication because it's so important. Most people who are sick are taking multiple medications, and most people don't take them appropriately. About 50% of Americans don't take their medications as prescribed. And it's easy to understand why, because it's overwhelming. But also, people don't ask the right questions. So in our guidebook, we give you an extensive list of questions to ask when you get a new medication. For instance, if you hear 3 times a day, what does that mean? Does the doctor mean breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Or do they mean set your clock? I mean every 8 hours. If that means getting up at midnight to take a pill, then that's what you have to do. You know, should you crush them? Can you break them in half? With food, without food? Are there any kinds of food you should avoid? You know, you have to ask all the right questions to help yourself take them as your doctor needs you to, and as you should obviously want to have the best chance of a good outcome. Yeah,
seems basic, but so so many things that you don't think of in the moment, and going to these doctor's appointments as prepared as you possibly can be is going to give you a huge leg up on dealing with what you got to deal with. So let's talk about the ZagroCare system. You have developed a bunch of different resources for people, but one of the key components there is this guidebook that you just mentioned. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so let me just back up a little bit and tell you how this all started for me. So after Zachary died, a lot of people started reaching out to me for advice. My mother has this. I got diagnosed with that. My husband just found out about this. What should I do? I don't know how to handle it. And I realized, wow, there's really an opportunity to help people better navigate the medical world. And I can start a nonprofit and raise money for our brain tumor research fund in Zach's memory. So I sat down at my computer and I wrote down everything I wished that people had told me. And then I sent it out to my group of supporters, like, oh, I have a new project. Who wants to help? These were people who were helping me while Zach was sick and then helped me with fundraising for his tumor afterwards. And I got about 30 people, a combination of patients, family caregivers, as well as medical professionals, who read it and added and edited. So it became this comprehensive guidebook with advice about what to do at every step of the way. So how to prepare for appointments, how to reduce your risk of diagnostic errors, how to make sure that you're asking your doctor to wash their hands, which is really important. What your rights are as a patient and how to manage all of this. It's so overwhelming to have to deal with a serious illness or injury. And it would be overwhelming if you were functioning at your best, but you're not. So the whole idea of the guidebook is to provide you with the information and tips that you need at every step of the way to help you be an engaged, empowered member of your medical team so you can get the best care possible.
Yeah, it's a very, very comprehensive book. It covers everything you can think of. And in addition to the guidebook, your Zago Care System has some tools, some actual, physical components. Talk to us about that.
Right. So as you had mentioned earlier, that I started with this notebook to get organized, but it didn't take me long to realize that I needed a bigger purse because there were so many things that I was accumulating related to Zach's care and going to the hospital regularly or doctor's visits. And then I got a tote bag, like, oh, my purse is not big enough. We need a dedicated bag because you have to keep everything organized, but also you're there for a long time. So you might want a sweater, you might want your charger, coffee cup, snacks, whatever. So the Zago Care System is based on my experience. So the whole thing comes in a big tote bag. It's big enough for all of our organizational tools that we provide, but also roomy enough that you can put in all your personal care and recreational items, whether it's a book or a magazine or your iPad or what have you. And inside we have a notebook, which we discussed, but we also tell you in the guidebook what kinds of things to keep track of and write down.
Yeah.
And then we have an accordion file where you can keep all your documents well organized, because even in this digital age, there's a lot of paper in medicine. You're still getting a lot of handouts.
Yes. Yeah.
Test results and, clinical trial information and nutritional guidelines and PT instructions. There's still a lot of paper in medicine. And then we have a little business card case. And I recommend that everybody get a business card, although you can obviously also keep them in your phone. But if your battery dies or you lose your phone or you have a glitch, you don't want to, forget who your doctors are.
What is my doctor's name? Yeah. What's my doctor's phone number? Yeah.
We had an emergency with Zachary. He took this chemo pill and it was part of a study. So he had to take it at the same time every day. And like within a 15-minute time zone. That was very strict. And we gave it to him one Friday night. Of course, these things never happen during a work day during the week. And like 20 minutes later, he threw up. So what do? I don't want to give him a second chemo pill, but what if I should? What do? I have to call the doctor. It's like 7:00 on a Friday night. I literally am freaking out so much I can't remember our doctor's name.
Right.
I'm like, what's his name? Thank God I had my card.
You had the card.
I pulled it out. And I'm like, oh goodness, how could I have forgotten this? But when you're really stressed like that, your mind just shuts off. Anyway, so we have the business card case. And then the last item in the bag is a little pouch, for lack of a better term, where you can keep your pens and your personal items and, Kleenex or medication or whatever you have to just have everything handy. And then, of course, our guidebook as well.
Right. And that's just, I guess, I mean, I think one thing that you discussed with me is that you were very careful always to put things back into the go bag.
Right.
Whenever,
right.
you know, if you got to take something out to work on something or look at it, put it right back, because you got to be ready to go. You just want to grab that bag as you're heading out the door and not have to think about it. It really a tremendous resource. And I'm going to remind you, folks at home, that Zago Care System, this is a charitable organization. Every bit of profit made off of those Zago Care Systems goes to research on brain tumors in Zachary's honor, which is really quite admirable. And also the other thing I need to mention, Roberta is making available to our listeners one of her resources, 31 cancer management tips, which is, as I said, her Zago Care System is applicable to any kind of illness or injury. She happens to have dealt with cancer, and a lot of people deal with cancer. And so this resource that she's making available just for our listeners, really fantastic. You'll be able to find that in the show notes on our website in about a week. It takes us about a week to get all that up on the website. So Roberta, thank you very much for that. Now, I just wanted to ask you, you went on this long journey with your son, and a lot of it was, well, some of it was really rough and some of it was really arduous. Did you ever get to a point where you thought, well, I don't know, should we be doing this? What are we doing here?
Do you mean in reference to treating him for the cancer?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, at some point, is it like, should we keep treating or should we just go down the other path?
Well, actually, for us, it wasn't a choice because Zach was on clinical trials. And if you reach a certain point, they take you off the medication. So at the end of Zach's life, he wasn't being treated for the cancer. He stayed on the 20 plus medications for all the side effects and the numerous problems he was having, but we had no choice. He had to come off treatment.
Oh, okay. I got it. I'm so sorry for your loss. I don't think I said that in the beginning, but it did lead to this really wonderful thing that you're doing. And I guess that's your silver lining. I do have to break away for a second because we have our Ask Kirsten segment of the podcast. So this is a question that was sent to us by email from somebody in cyberspace who has a question. If you have a question, you are welcome to send it to us by email. It's info@absolutetrustcouncil.com, and you send your question, you might get an answer on the air. So my question today, my dad is 74 in a skilled nursing facility and receiving Medi-Cal benefits to help pay for that. My mom says they were told they don't need to do any further estate planning because really their only asset is their home, which is exempt under Medi-Cal. Is that right? That is a really good question. So the answer is not really. That's not really right. You're right. The asset is exempt from Medi-Cal, meaning it doesn't disqualify you from Medi-Cal. But most people are concerned about what we call estate recovery, meaning after you die, the state of California expects to be paid back for all the Medi-Cal services you received. And the way to avoid that is by not having a probate estate, meaning you have to do estate planning, you have to set up a trust, the trust would own the home, and then it would pass to the children on on death rather than to the state of California. So very important for folks on Medi-Cal, even if they feel like they don't have any assets, very important for them to at least think about doing estate planning. Okay, that's the Ask Kirsten segment. And I'm back now with Roberta. So, and you have become really, in a way, something of an evangelist about this, like you want people to know that this is hard and you need to be prepared. And so the Zago system is available. It's the guidebook. It's all of those things that we talked about. And in addition, I know you have a blog. You put blog posts up with amazing regularity. I'm very impressed. Talk a little bit about your blog.
Yeah, I do post a new blog every week. We post them on Mondays. I have almost 200 blog posts written and posted now. They are on a variety of topics of interest to patients and family caregivers, a wide range of topics, everything from what is sepsis to how to avoid infections in the hospital to how to communicate better with your doctor and what's a DNR, and just a wide range of topics. And they're research-based, but easy to read with easy to follow tips.
Yeah. So if you're looking for any kind of resource in this vein, it's zagocare.org is the website. Check it out. It's just full of amazing things. And one of the things, Roberta, that I know you said to me is a lot of a certain percentage of the folks who get your Zago care system are getting it for other people.
Right.
That people know other people who are dealing with some kind of serious illness, and they think this would be really useful to this other person, not me myself, which is really interesting. Something to keep in mind if you're listening out there and you have friends or family members who are going through this. That could be a really useful tool.
Right.
Okay. No, go ahead.
When you think about, learning that someone is dealing with something serious, you might want to send flowers or send over a chicken dinner, but for the same amount of money, you're giving them a gift that's going to help them get the best medical care possible. And also at the same time, you're supporting pediatric brain tumor research. So it's a win-win.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Now we do have some audience questions, so I'm going to turn to the questions. Okay. So the first question, Roberta, do you have other children? How did this experience affect other family members?
That's a great question. We do have another son who was 16 when Zachary died. So obviously that was a traumatic event for him as well as for my husband and myself. He's doing really well now, but it was a hard transition for him. It's hard to lose a sibling, and then also it's hard to become the only child all of a sudden who now has so much attention on him. Because for me, I have this hole in my heart from losing Zach, and Jake is my remedy. And honestly, that's a lot of pressure to put on a child.
Yeah, that is a lot.
I try to be reasonable, but I'm sure he feels it.
Yeah, but I'm sure that he also understands and will cut you a little bit of slack.
Yeah, we have a great relationship. We're lucky.
Okay, so I've got. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I appreciate you sharing your experience and tools to help others. Does your guidebook provide tips on how to deal with insurance companies, either on getting care authorized or on dealing with the billing?
We do have a section.
That's
on that.
Something you cover. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. Mostly I'm getting a lot of, this is really great. Thank you so much. Just so you can't see that, Roberta, but I'm looking for questions. Yeah, it's all about, thank you so much. This is really great. So that's the questions. I'm going to remind everybody about the 31 care management tips, which will be available. You'll be able to download it right on our website in the show notes for this episode. And I think it's showing on the screen right now. So go there and look for that. Go to zagocare.org to see all the resources that Roberta's got available, in particular that Zago Care system. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience. I'm sure you've shared it many, many times. Probably doesn't make it any easier. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kirsten, for having me. And thank you for all the viewers out there for watching us today.
Yes, and thank you, all my viewers. We're so glad you were here today. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed the show, learned something, and I look forward to connecting with you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Absolute Trust Talk Live. If you enjoyed listening in, then don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may listen by searching Absolute Trust Talk. While you're there, we would also love for you to leave us a review. And then why not share your favorite episodes with family, friends, or colleagues too? You can find all of our shows and corresponding show notes by visiting absolutetrustcouncil.com. You'll also find a variety of other free resources, including our ebooks, videos, blogs, presentations, and more. If you need help with your estate planning or administration, we also offer a free discovery call to help get the process started. You can find more information on booking your session by visiting absolutetrustcouncil.com/scheduling. Don't forget to keep an eye out for our next live episode in 2 weeks. If you join us for the broadcast, you can submit questions during the show. But if not, don't worry. You can always get in touch with us by sending a quick message to info@absolutetrustcouncil.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you soon.